Welcome to your very first Astro video. In this series, I'll show you how to get started with the web framework Astro by building a custom blog from scratch. We'll cover everything from building simple UI components to advanced routing, pagination, generating an RSS feed, incorporating React, Tailwind into CMS, and more. In the end, we'll publish the finished code to Netlify, and I'll show you how to update your blog with continuous integration each time you post. All right, let's get started. If you've kept your ear to the ground at all this past year in the JavaScript space, you've likely heard a lot about Astro, and there's good reason. It's a modern take on building for the web that's ideal for building incredibly fast, content-focused sites. Now with Astro, you get the speed and simplicity of a basic static site generator with the power of JavaScript just when you need it. Over the years, front-end web development has moved more and more into using JavaScript for everything, including content. Now, that trajectory has resulted in lots of content-heavy sites relying on large client-side JavaScript bundles. And so we've got an impasse. As developers, we want to use JavaScript to template out our sites, but this often results in a slow experience for sites that could basically just be a quickly fetched HTML page. Now here's where Astro shines. You can use nearly any front-end framework, React, Svelte, Vue, Lit, and more, because Astro is UI agnostic. You can use those to create content, but Astro ships no client-side JavaScript by default. That's right, no JavaScript. On build, it ships a static HTML page. If your components require interactivity, however, you can choose to intelligently hydrate those individual components. This is called island architecture, where the page itself is just a static HTML page with individual islands of interactivity where needed. What's more, you can choose when to hydrate components based on your needs with special directives. For example, you can choose to hydrate your page on load, or you can use client visible to delay loading your JavaScript bundle until it's visible on the screen. Everyone wins. You get the dev experience you prefer, and your blog visitors get to browse a crazy fast plain HTML site with little pockets of JavaScript where needed. Now in this series, we mostly won't be using external UI frameworks. Instead, we'll write Astro files for most of our routes and components. Now Astro files are basically just HTML with superpowers. Each Astro file is separated into two sections: the front matter, where you can write JavaScript, pass and receive props, and top-level await data to all be handled on build, and the body, which is plain HTML with the JSX-like syntax for templating out HTML. It's like JSX without all the annoying parts. The end result of working with Astro is that you feel like you're just writing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You don't feel like you're learning a framework or having to include a bunch of custom stuff. Use the platform, right? Let me mention two other things before I preview the finished site for you, and then we get the project up and running. First, while Astro is great for things like document or landing or blog or marketing or personal pages and other static content, it's also quickly moving beyond those use cases. They've recently released SSR support, and you can easily include state stores to create a more fully interactive site if you prefer. Now, we're not going to be doing that in this series, but I just wanted to point that out. Second, let me chat a bit about my assumptions about you going into this series and some other alternatives to starting with Astro. I'm assuming you know the basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you don't, no worries, but just know that I'll focus on Astro rather than explaining each HTML, CSS, or JavaScript concept. Now, you may be interested in Astro, but don't want to go through a full course. Well, I've just released an Astro in 20 minutes crash course on my channel where I cover all the basics, working with Astro components, basic routing using React in Astro, styling with Tailwind, and more, and it's much faster paced than this course, and it would be a great place to start if you just want to figure out a little bit more about Astro before diving into an extended tutorial. Now, before I show you the custom site we're going to build, know that there are lots of starter templates out there that will get you a site or a blog without all the custom work we're going to be doing here. If that's your need, just go check out those themes on the Astro website. All right, let's look at the site we're going to build. Here it is, and I've actually got this up and running on my Coding in Public site so that you can navigate to it directly from there. See, it's got a nice little header area and then these blog posts on the home page. If you clicked any of these, obviously it would go to that blog post. We've also got a couple of other routes though, like we've got this about route that happens to be the same as what's on the home page, but just to show you different routing. We've also got a blog itself that has pagination built in by default and a list of categories with how many times each of those categories have been used. So you can just click forward to the next kind of sub route and then go backwards if you want to. Those all display dynamically. Now, each of these names also will give dynamic lists of posts by that person. Same thing when you come into here and you click on any of the categories, those also will list to posts about that reference doc. Now, there's also links inside of each of these blog posts. So this is a link back to any post with a reference doc category, and this is a link to a page with all of Darnell's posts. On top of that, when you scroll down here, you see that we've got this nice sidebar that will show any related posts. That is posts that share this exact same category, along with a list of all blog categories. And you can see how you could use this same idea to build out like an archive if you want to. We're not going to do that in this tutorial, but you'll have everything you need from working in this tutorial to do that yourself. Now, I've also created a lot of these tab animations just in the CSS. We're not going to be really writing much CSS throughout this project. In fact, I'll talk about the CSS in a moment, but you can see you get all this nice tabbing by default as you build out this site. Now, there's two other things I want to show you about the styling, and that is that number one, we have dark mode. All right, so by default, I've built this so it has dark mode, and you can see it picks up that color, but it kind of customizes it for the dark mode look. And all this looks great in dark mode. On top of that, we also have made this totally responsive. You can see here, even on a small screen size, everything looks great. You can click around and everything should work for you just like that. As you get larger, eventually the sidebar kind of snaps up here, right over here, and displays on the right. Now, I've showed you a lot of routes, but I've spent a lot of time talking about CSS. I will let you know we're not really going to write much CSS. I really want this to be focused on Astro. So I've created a global CSS file that you'll essentially import in one of the lessons, and then you won't really touch it again. Now, it is a little fragile because you actually have to follow exactly what I'm typing for it to use that style sheet appropriately, but that's so that we can focus on Astro. So I hope you'll forgive the fragility of that CSS file. The CSS for this site is really not meant to be a starter. I've optimized the styling for you learning Astro, not for your customization. Well, hopefully that gets you excited about what we're going to build, and you're going to have a site that looks exactly like this in the end. Now let's go ahead and get this set up. So let me switch over to my terminal, and you do need Node.js on your machine. If you're not sure if you have Node.js, you can just do node-version, and it should tell you that you've got something. I happen to have 19.1. I didn't check the docs to see what you need for Astro, but any of the major versions from the last several years should work. Now, one of the great things about working with Astro is they've done a lot of work on their CLI tooling. Since I'm in the directory where I want to build this, I'm just going to type npm create, and then you'll see already I'm getting this autocomplete Astro at latest. If I hit enter, I get this nice animation, and then it asks me what I want my project to be called. I'm going to call mine Astro blog tutorial. Now in this case, we're going to start with a completely empty project so I can start from the beginning with you. So you can go ahead and just arrow down to that and hit enter. And then I'll press Y to let it install my npm dependencies. Next, it asks if I want to initialize a new Git repository, and I'll press Y. And then you can use TypeScript directly in Astro. I'm going to actually go down to relaxed. That way I really don't have to. I will show you a little bit as we get going though. And that's it. That's all there is to set it up. So let's cd into it, Astro blog tutorial right here. If you have VS Code and on Mac, you have to actually set it up this way. You can do code dot and then it will open it up, or you can just go over to the folder and right click it and open it in VS Code. Okay, that's all there is to it. I actually have it up and running, and now we're ready to actually write some code in Astro. Now, one thing I want to point out is if you come into the package.json file, this is the version I'm using. So if you ever have a problem implementing something I've done in this tutorial, check first to make sure that whatever version you have hasn't changed the way Astro works. Astro's been pretty stable since the summer when it publicly launched, but you may find a thing or two that is updated versus what I show you in this tutorial. Now, if you're in VS Code, you're going to want to make sure that you've installed this Astro extension. This makes working with Astro a breeze. It makes it really fun. It highlights everything for you. And then on top of that, it gives you auto completions, and it's just a really smart tooling. So it's this official plugin by Astro that you want to make sure you install. I'll be using it all throughout this tutorial series. Well, I hope you're as excited as I am. We're going to take our time in this series so that you'll be confident with Astro by the end. Now, if you get stuck at any point, let me point out a few helps. First of all, I've included a link to the GitHub repo in the description, and each lesson has a corresponding branch that holds all the finished code for the video. So if I come over here, you can see I've got all of these. I do have a couple other lessons past 16, but they don't really change the code. So that's the last one. This will be the finished code, lesson 16. But all you have to do if you want to jump in, for instance, if you have problems installing it, you can just jump in right here, go to lesson 1, grab the code right here, download the zip file, unzip it, and then open it up in VS Code. You can, of course, also just come into the folders themselves and then get what you need out of here. So sometimes I'll ask you to copy things from here, or sometimes you'll just want to see, hey, what am I missing? What did I type differently than he typed? Of course, if you get stuck, you can also comment on the video, and as I have time, I'll be happy to help wherever I can. A second help for you would be the Astro.build website itself. Now, the docs are amongst the best I've ever seen for any project, and not only do they have it in English, but they're constantly translating them to all kinds of languages, so if English is not your preferred language, hopefully one of these will be better for you. Third, and the final thing, is to join the Discord community. The community really is amazing. Every time I ask a question in the Discord, super kind and super smart people are quick to help. Finally, I'll be slowly releasing this course over the next several weeks. Now, if you don't want to wait for that and you'd rather access like one single video that's the entire course all put together, I posted a link for that over on my Patreon channel for all my patrons. Or you can just wait and eventually all of them will be out on the YouTube channel. No pressure to support me for months on end, but if you sign up for a month at any amount, you can get the full access to the course right now. I want to say a huge thanks to the 3 who have been supporting me, as it's enabled me to spend more time developing this series. I can't wait to get started, so let's not wait. Astro, here we come.